if you want to make sense of any text, you have to follow certain rules, and different literatures have different rules. You have the ideas of context, you have syntax, you have what is something to be taken literally, or it's just homiletical. Everything has its own rules, and how so much more so when it comes to determining the law, determining how to read a text is extremely important. And so for that, we have what's called the 13 Middot of the Torah, and taught by Rabbi Yishmael. It's called the Breita of Rabbi Yishmael, and it is really the pinnacle, the hallmark of the oral tradition, what's not written in the Torah, and it's the rules that the rabbis passed on from one generation to the other in terms of how to read the Torah and how to determine the law. It's important to note that a lot of these rules are logical. Nonetheless, you cannot invoke them or use them to study the Torah unless you have a previous generation, unless you have a tradition that's the way to read it. So there's this thing called 13 Midot of Rabbi Yishmael, this 13 methods that the way they were articulated by Rabbi Yishmael, and obviously there are different opinions about each one. There's much to discuss in each one, but I'll just give you a broad overview of them and speak of them in a nutshell. So the first one is the most famous one, the Kal Vachomer, which is a logical rule. If something applies to the light, it has to apply to the more serious one. Kal, light; Chomer, more heavy. To use school language, if you have to be polite to your teacher, Kal vachomer, how so much more so do you have to be polite to your principal? So that is, a rule we use in halacha, and it comes up often. There's a whole discussion: can any person make a kal vachomer, and when do we use it? That's another conversation, but that's kal vachomer. The second is a gzera shava. Gzera shava means you have two words that are identical in two completely parts of the Torah, and you use the identical words that appear in two places to link the two parshiot and say that because they share this common word, they must have also laws that are in common or history that's in common. For example, the story of the daughters of Tzlofchad says Vayu b'nei Yisrael b'midbar, and it says Avinu met b'midbar. And with the story of the Mokoshesh, the person who violated Shabbat, it says Vayu b'nei Yisrael b'midbar. The rabbis say the word b'midbar appears here, appears there. There is a link. Obviously, not every person can link that those two words unless they have the Mesorah, the tradition of the Torah Shebe'al Peh. But that is a gzera shava. Gzera shava means you have one identical word in two completely different places. The next one is a binyan av. Binyan av means you have a rule that's established and then applied universally. So, for example, you have certain mitzvahs that are the responsibility of the father to the son. For example, Brit Milah, Pidyon Ben, and teaching Torah. And so we learn a binyan av that in one of those, we know that if the father didn't do it, the son needs to fulfill it when the son grows up. Binyan av, anytime that the father has a responsibility to do it to a child, to do something on behalf of their child, if he doesn't do it, the child has to take it to themselves when they turn 13. Binyan av, it's been established. Next one is a really fun one, klal uprat. Klal means the general rule, prat means a specific rule. So what is klal uprat? So for example, it says you bring a korban from an animal, mina bakar umina tzon, from the cattle and then from the sheep. So it says you bring a korban, mina behema, any animal, but then it says mina bakar umina tzon. It has to be a domesticated animal. So you have the klal, the general, behema, any animal that's a mammal, and then you have bakar and tzon, any domesticated animal. So the klal can only include what's in the prat. So klal, behema, and prat, bakar v'tzon, meaning the general is modified by the specific. That's what klal uprat is. And then you have the reverse. You have the prat uklal, where you have something specific and you have a general rule. So the general rule expands the specific, but not not in a radical way, not completely. So, for example, the most famously something that's learned often in middle school is Parak HaMafkid in Bava Metzia. So it says, Ki iten isha re'eu, if you give your friend to look after, Chamor oseh, your donkey or your sheep, Shor oseh, or your ox or your sheep, V'chol behema, and any behema. So the klal adds to the prat, which means it could be anything, but it has to follow rules that are similar to the prat. Next is a really fun one. It's klal uprat uklal. You have a general, a specific, and a general again, in which case we say that the specific colors the general, but it doesn't completely specify it. So, for example, it says klal uprat uklal. If you have a general, a specific, and a general, it remains a general rule, but you only look at it through the lens of the specific. And another one, we have a lot of klal uprat make up this list of 13. You have what's called klal shehu tzarich leprat, uprat shehu tzarich leklal. Anytime you have a prat that needs the klal that needs a prat, for example, in the parsha of Kiddush Bechorot, you have Kadesh li kol bechor. Every single bechor is holy, but you would think that includes also both male cattle and female cattle. And then it says kol bechor zachar takdish, which applies only to zachar and not nekeva. So you would think that excludes also a cesarean, which that happens also with humans. A cesarean is exempt from being a bechor. No, here you say klal shehu tzarich leprat, prat shehu tzarich leklal. It has to be. I'm sorry. In this case, the opposite. The klal shehu tzarich leprat and prat shehu tzarich leklal also excludes a cesarean. Next is kol davar shaya bichlal v'yatza min haklal lo lelamed al atzmo yatza ela lelamed al haklal kulo yatza. Something that was included in the general rule and yet it was excluded later on and signaled out. That comes to teach you something about everything else. For example, if it says that you can't eat a korban that is impure, but then it also says that if a person eats a korban shlamim and they're impure, then that's also very much forbidden. So what does that come to teach you? It comes to teach you that the entire rule is not talking about any holy thing, but only holy things that are brought on the mizbech. So that's something shehaya bechlal. The Torah says, don't eat anything holy when you're unholy. Then it says, but don't eat shlamim. Well, why did you tell me shlamim? I know shlamim, it's one of the korbanot. No, it's coming to say that just like shlamim are a korban that's holy and brought to the mizbeach, so too, anytime we're talking about this rule of not eating something unholy and the severe punishment that comes with it is only talking about korbanot mizbeach. Davar shehaya bechlal, it was in the klal, and it came out, it didn't come to teach only about itself, but it came to teach about everything. Another one that's similar to that is kol davar shehaya bichlal, something that was inside the rule, v'yatza lit'on to'an acher shehu kinyano, and it goes out, it gets excluded to say something else that is similar. Yatza lehakel v'lo lachmir. It obviously is being taken out to make things more lenient rather than more strict. The example that's given is it says that with regard to the Ir Miklat, the city of refuge, that if you kill someone by accident, you go to the Ir Miklat, and it says that the Rotzeach is excluded because he usually should be included in Makeh Ish Vamet, but nonetheless he's been excluded, and therefore it comes to make things lighter. So always when something is made as an exception and taken out, it's usually for the purpose of making things lighter, not more strict. And then you have similar kol davar shehaya bichlal ve'yatza liton to'an acher shelo keinyano. If it's coming to be excluded for the sake of something that's not related to it, then yatza lehakel ulachmir. If it's taken out for something completely unrelated, it's for the sake of something heavy and unrelated. Next, kol davar I'm sorry, it's taken out for kal and chamor. Next, kol davar shaya bichlal v'yatza ladun bedavar chadash. If something was in the general rule and then it was taken out of that context to discuss and used to discuss another whole new concept, you cannot say that now it goes back to its main rule unless the pasuk explicitly brings it back. I want to add, a lot of these rules that we're talking about are often used most often in cases that relate to korbanot, tzarat, and really heavy and complicated halachic discussions. It's not something you'll usually run into when you're learning sukkah or psachim, but it's important to be aware of these rules. Next, davar alamed minyano v'davar alamed misofo. This one, every single kid learns about already, I believe, in 6th grade or earlier, and that is davar alamed minyano, something that's learned from context. For example, if I ask you, where do we know, when it says lo tignov in the Torah, when it says don't steal in the 10 Commandments, what does it mean? Everyone knows Rashi says it's not talking about stealing only, it's talking about kidnapping. How do you know? Davar alamed minyano, from context, because it's inside the 10 Commandments, right next to lo tirtzach, which is a very serious avera. So davar alamed minyano v'davar alamed misofo, something that's learned from context or from the from the place it ends up in. And now the final last 13th one, kol hakavod for making it here, is and this is the one when they read the Braita of Rabbi Yishmael, it is often read out loud right before the Kaddish in the morning. Shnei ktuvim hamakhshishim ze et ze ad sheyavo katuv hashlishi ve'yachriya b'neihem. 3 psukim, when you have 2 psukim that contradict one another, then you only can resolve that conflict by looking for a 3rd verse that reconciles and explains it. For example, it says that Hashem spoke to Moshe, to Bnei Israel from Har Sinai. Another verse says Hashem spoke to us from the heavens. So it says that the heavens came down on Har Sinai. That's more of a spiritual, homiletical, whatever you want to call it, type of discussion rather than korbanot and tzarat, which are very tangible. So those are if you have 2 psukim that contradict one another, then you cannot reconcile them unless you have a 3rd one. So that's the Braita of Rabbi Yishmael. I thank you for listening. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to ask. Thank you.